Now, you upset with something?
What you really upset?
I just don't like you. You don't? No.
From Russell Westbrook's ice-cold "I just don't like you" that stunned an entire press room to Allen Iverson's legendary practice rant that became a cultural phenomenon to Joel Embiid's shocking physical confrontation that crossed every professional boundary, these NBA player-journalist clashes revealed the explosive moments. But which confrontation topped our list? Let's find out. LeBron James versus Stephen A. Smith courtside. The Crypto.com arena buzzed with anticipation during a high-stakes Lakers-Knicks game in March 2025, but the electricity had as much to do with brewing tension between two titans as with basketball action. The game itself was compelling, a marquee matchup between historic franchises with playoff implications that drew celebrities and fans from across Los Angeles. But real drama was happening off the court. Stephen A. Smith, ESPN's polarizing analyst and debate show host, was in his usual courtside position, enjoying premium access that came with his status as one of sports media's most prominent personalities. For weeks leading up to this confrontation, Smith had been increasingly vocal in his criticism of Bronny James, LeBron's eldest son, who had recently entered the NBA and was trying to establish himself as a professional player. The criticism wasn't necessarily unfair from a purely analytical standpoint. Bronny was a young player trying to find his footing at basketball's highest level, and his performance had been inconsistent as he adjusted to NBA competition. Smith's criticism was particularly pointed because of his massive platform and the weight his opinions carried throughout the basketball world. This wasn't just any media member offering analysis. This was one of sports media's most recognizable voices, whose opinions were discussed across social media, sports talk radio, and basketball forums worldwide.
How many times have I said that? I'm simply saying, yo, he's not ready yet. And to put him out there, getting him exposed to that is really hard to watch.
The criticism had been questioning not just Bronny's current abilities, but his fundamental readiness for professional basketball and long-term potential. For LeBron James, this transcended typical sports analysis he had learned to navigate throughout his legendary career. This wasn't about his own performance or legacy. This was about his son, his family, and unique pressures that came with being the child of one of basketball's most famous players. You can see LeBron aggressively talking to Stephen A. Smith with intensity. LeBron, fueled by paternal protectiveness, spotted Stephen A. Smith courtside and marched over with fire in his eyes. In a tense, viral exchange, LeBron leaned in close, jabbing his finger and sternly warning Smith to keep my son's name out of your mouth, making unmistakably clear this was personal rather than professional. What made this confrontation particularly compelling was the clash between two titans of their respective fields. While LeBron's confrontation with Stephen A. Smith was driven by paternal instinct, our next entry reveals how ideological differences can create equally explosive tensions between stars and the media. Kyrie Irving versus Nick Friedel. In October 2022, Kyrie Irving made a decision that would spiral into one of the most controversial athlete-media confrontations in recent NBA history. Irving, then playing for the Brooklyn Nets, shared a link on his social media platforms to a documentary film containing deeply problematic anti-Semitic content and conspiracy theories. This decision wasn't made in a vacuum. Irving had already established a reputation for embracing controversial viewpoints, from flat earth theories to vaccination stances. The documentary promoted harmful stereotypes and conspiracy theories about Jewish people, content that many viewed as dangerous and discriminatory. The film included claims about Jewish people controlling media and financial institutions, promoted debunked historical narratives, and contained the kind of content that has historically been used to justify persecution. When Irving shared this material with his millions of followers, it immediately became a major story extending far beyond basketball. When ESPN reporter Nick Friedel pressed Irving about the implications during a Brooklyn Nets press conference, the atmosphere became electric with tension. The assembled media knew they were witnessing a potentially explosive confrontation, as Irving's history of controversial statements had established him as someone unlikely to offer standard diplomatic responses.
Put it out there just like you put things out there, right?
Yeah, but it's not.
You put things out there for a living, right?
Right, but my stuff is not
so let's move on.
Filled with anti-Semitic
Let's
stuff.
move on. Don't dehumanize me up here.
Irving didn't offer typical deflection or media-trained responses. Instead, he became visibly defensive, his demeanor shifting from the usual professional athlete persona to something much more raw and confrontational. His eyes flashed with defiance as he accused Friedel and the broader media of engaging in sensationalism and what he termed dehumanizing coverage that reduced him to controversial soundbites. Irving felt felt unfairly targeted, arguing that the media was intentionally misrepresenting his intentions and beliefs while ignoring positive aspects of his public persona. From Friedel's perspective, the questions were necessary journalism. When public figures with massive platforms share content promoting harmful stereotypes, it becomes legitimate news requiring direct questioning and accountability. Irving refused to back down or offer clarification that might have diffused the situation, instead doubling down on his defensive stance. Unlike Irving's ideological clash with Friedel, sometimes the most intense confrontations arise from pure athletic heartbreak and frustration over missed opportunities. LeBron James versus Mark Schwartz, June 1st, 2018, will forever be remembered as one of the most heartbreaking nights in LeBron James's legendary career. Game 1 of the NBA Finals between Cleveland Cavaliers and Golden State Warriors wasn't just any playoff game. This was LeBron, in what many suspected might be his final season with hometown Cleveland, facing the super team that had denied him championships in previous years. LeBron James delivered a spectacular 51-point performance that showcased every aspect of his legendary skill set. He scored from every area of the floor, facilitated opportunities for teammates, and carried the Cavaliers against a Warriors team many considered one of the greatest talent assemblies in NBA history. The performance was heroic, the kind of individual effort that enters basketball mythology. But basketball doesn't always reward individual brilliance with team success. Despite LeBron's otherworldly performance, the Cavaliers found themselves in overtime, locked in a battle that would set the series tone. Then disaster struck. J.R. Smith secured a crucial offensive rebound in regulation's final seconds with the game tied, but inexplicably dribbled away from the basket, apparently thinking Cleveland was ahead. The confusion was visible on LeBron's face in real-time disbelief, frustration, and heartbreak that became an instant meme but represented something deeper. This was a player who had just given everything, watching potential triumph slip away due to a teammate's mental error. The Cavaliers lost in overtime, and what should have been a triumphant victory became a devastating defeat. In the post-game press conference, the sting of defeat was palpable. LeBron sat at the podium, still processing what had transpired, trying to maintain professional composure. ESPN. Reporter Mark Schwartz began asking probing questions about Smith's state of mind.
So, I don't know what JR was thinking. I don't know the question you were trying to ask.
And decision-making in those crucial moments. Under normal circumstances, LeBron might have handled these questions with typical media savvy, but these weren't normal circumstances. Visibly exhausted and irritated, LeBron rebuffed the probes multiple times before finally snapping. The breaking point came when he realized the press conference was becoming focused entirely on his teammate's mistake rather than his historic performance. He grabbed his briefcase, stood up, and delivered a curt "be better tomorrow" before walking out. LeBron stands up and walks away from podium. The abrupt exit underscored LeBron's frustration with repetitive questioning amid high-stakes pressure, revealing the human side of even the most composed superstars when emotional toll becomes unbearable. While LeBron's walkout was a moment of raw frustration, sometimes player media tensions build over years until they explode in legendary fashion that defines an entire career. Allen Iverson's practice rant. On May 7, 2002, just days after the Philadelphia 76ers playoff exit against the Boston Celtics, Allen Iverson walked into what should have been routine end-of-season media obligations. But nothing about Iverson's life had ever been routine. He arrived carrying multiple burdens, swirling trade rumors suggesting the organization might move him, and personal grief over a close friend's recent death. Iverson had once again carried Philadelphia deeper into playoffs than most expected, playing through injuries and leading a limited roster through sheer will. His individual performances had been heroic, showcasing the heart and determination that made him one of basketball's most beloved figures. Yet despite his efforts, the team fell short, and post-mortem analysis focused on areas where critics felt he could have done more. The practice attendance issue had been a recurring theme throughout Iverson's career, with coaches and management expressing frustration with his preparation approach. The criticism often portrayed him as someone who didn't take preparation seriously or felt above day-to-day responsibilities that other players fulfilled as professional obligations. When reporters began fixating on his missed practices rather than his on-court heroics, something inside Iverson snapped. This wasn't about basketball attendance. This was about respect, recognition, and the fundamental disconnect between what Iverson felt he had given to the game versus how his contributions were being evaluated.
We sitting here, I'm supposed to be the franchise player, and we're in here talking about practice.
Iverson's frustration erupted into an unforgettable tirade, with him pacing and gesturing wildly as he repeated practice over 20 times in escalating disbelief. We're talking about practice, man. Not a game, not a game, practice.
Not a game. Not the game that I go out there and die for and play every game like it's my last. Not the game. We're talking about practice, man.
His voice cracked with emotion as he defended his dedication amid exhaustion and sorrow, asking rhetorical questions that revealed his frustration's depth. Where Iverson's explosive rant became an instant cultural phenomenon, some player-journalist conflicts simmer for years before erupting into personal warfare that transcends professional boundaries. Russell Westbrook's long-running feud with Barry Tramiel. What started as subtle friction evolved into one of the NBA's most infamous media feuds, beginning around 2015 during Russell Westbrook's prime years with Oklahoma City Thunder. The conflict between Westbrook and beat writer Barry Tramiel wasn't born from a single incident, but grew from what Westbrook perceived as overly critical coverage from the local journalist supposed to cover the team fairly. The tension escalated dramatically when Tramiel became associated with coverage including inflammatory headlines like "Mr. Unreliable," aimed at Westbrook's teammate Kevin Durant during crucial playoff moments. For Westbrook, this wasn't about protecting his own reputation. It was defending a teammate and close friend against what he viewed as unnecessarily harsh criticism that could affect team chemistry and individual confidence. Westbrook's legendary loyalty to teammates was well documented throughout his career, representing one of his most admirable qualities. He consistently defended teammates publicly, took responsibility for team failures, and created a culture of mutual support. Seeing Durant subjected to what he felt was unfair treatment created lasting resentment toward Tramiel specifically. The first major public confrontation occurred in 2015, when subtle friction evolved into open hostility that shocked everyone in the room. In post-game scrums, Westbrook's responses turned icy, culminating in a blunt "I just don't like you" directed at Tramiel that sent shockwaves through assembled media and created incredibly uncomfortable atmosphere.
Now, are you upset with something?
She really upset.
I just don't like you.
You don't?
No.
Do you not like Nick either?
I love Nick, but I don't like you.
Well, you gave us about the same answers.
Yeah. You got another question?
This wasn't heat of the moment emotion following disappointing loss. This was a calculated, deliberate statement delivered with intensity that made clear this was personal rather than professional. The directness of "I just don't like you" was stunning in its honesty, cutting through all usual diplomatic language characterizing athlete-media interactions. The feud continued with repeated next question dismissals in 2017 and 2019, with Westbrook refusing to engage regardless of question content or relevance. These weren't instances where Tramiel asked inappropriate questions. Often his questions were standard basketball inquiries about strategy, performance, or team dynamics, but Westbrook's personal dislike had reached a point where he simply wouldn't engage professionally. While Westbrook's feud with Tramiel was marked by cold hostility and personal animosity, sometimes confrontations take a completely different turn when players respond with unexpected wisdom and philosophical depth. Giannis Antetokounmpo's philosophical response to Eric Neem. The Milwaukee Bucks locker room felt like a pressure cooker after their stunning first-round playoff elimination by the Miami Heat in April 2023. The defending NBA champions had entered the playoffs as the Eastern Conference's top seed, carrying enormous expectations and the weight of being considered clear favorites to repeat as champions. The Miami loss wasn't just disappointing, it was shocking, representing one of recent playoff history's biggest upsets. Giannis Antetokounmpo sat for the post-game press conference carrying multiple burdens. He was nursing injuries that had limited his effectiveness throughout the series, dealing with profound disappointment from a season that ended far earlier than expected, and facing questions about whether the Bucks' championship window was closing. The expectations surrounding the Bucks had been astronomical entering the playoffs. They had won 58 games during the regular season, secured the top seed in a competitive Eastern Conference, and possessed what many considered one of the most talented rosters in the league. When the Athletic's Eric Nehm asked if he viewed the season as a failure, the question seemed routine given the context. After all, this was a team with championship aspirations, significant talent, and high expectations. By any objective measure, losing in the first round after earning the top seed could reasonably be characterized as failure to meet goals. Eric asked, "Do you view this season as a failure?" There's no failure in sports. You have good days, bad days. Some days it's your turn, some days it's not. But what followed was anything but routine. Instead of offering standard athlete responses about disappointment and looking forward to next season, Giannis launched into philosophical meditation on the nature of failure, success, and growth. His voice rising with passion, he compared the season's ups and downs to life's steps, rejecting the question's premise while revealing deep thinking about competition and development.
You asked me the same question last year, Eric. Okay, do you get the promotion every year on your job? No, right? So every year you work is a failure. Yes or no? No. Every year you work towards something, towards a goal.
Giannis emphatically rejected the failure label, declaring, "There's no failure in sports." His passionate delivery made clear this wasn't deflection. This was fundamental philosophical disagreement with how society frames athletic achievement. There's good days, bad days. Some days you're successful, some days you're not. That's what sports is about. While Giannis met difficult questions with philosophical wisdom, sometimes players encounter journalists whose unprofessional behavior demands a more direct and confrontational response. Pascal Siakam puts Greg Doyle in his place. The air was thick with disappointment in the Indiana Pacers post-game press room after a crushing Game 5 playoff loss to the Knicks in May 2025. The loss represented more than just another playoff defeat. It was a devastating blow to a team that had fought valiantly throughout the series, but found themselves on elimination's brink. Pascal Siakam, acquired specifically for deeper playoff runs, sat down still sweating from the battle, prepared for typical post-game questions. But the context of who was asking questions mattered enormously. Enter Greg Doyle, Indianapolis Star columnist who had established a reputation for crossing professional boundaries and creating uncomfortable situations with athletes. Doyle was already infamous for his awkward, unprofessional interaction with WNBA star Caitlin Clark the previous year, an incident raising serious questions about his journalism approach and ability to maintain appropriate boundaries. The Caitlin Clark incident had been particularly cringeworthy, involving inappropriate gestures and comments that made both Clark and observers deeply uncomfortable while raising broader questions about sexism in sports media. The incident had sparked widespread discussions about different standards some male reporters applied when interacting with female versus male athletes, marking Doyle as someone whose behavior warranted scrutiny.
You're looking for something, I know, but damn. No, but I'm telling you though. I told you. What else you want me to tell you? Well, what about you telling me? So go ahead. Who's this guy? What's your name, bro? Oh.
When Doyle pressed Siakam on whether the Knicks simply played harder, the question itself might have been reasonable in different circumstances and from a different reporter. Asking about effort and intensity is standard post-game analysis, and players are generally expected to address these topics even when questions might be uncomfortable. But context mattered enormously. This was Greg Doyle asking, a reporter whose recent history suggested patterns of inappropriate behavior and unprofessional conduct. Siakam, like many modern athletes, was well aware of Doyle's reputation and his history of creating uncomfortable situations with athletes he was supposed to cover professionally. The question about whether the opposing team had played harder also carried implications beyond simple strategic analysis. It suggested that the Pacers might have lacked effort or competitive spirit, one of the most serious accusations that can be leveled against professional athletes who pride themselves on work ethic and competitive drive. Unlike Siakam's measured response to an unprofessional journalist, our top confrontation involved a complete breakdown of professional boundaries that shocked the entire basketball world. Joel Embiid shoves Marcus Hayes. Topping our countdown is the most shocking, consequential, and personally devastating confrontation between an NBA player and journalist in recent memory. The tension had been building for days following a frustrating loss to the Memphis Grizzlies on November 2nd, 2024. The Philadelphia 76 ERs were struggling early in the season, dealing with injuries, chemistry issues, and mounting pressure that comes with championship expectations in one of basketball's most passionate cities. Joel Embiid, the team's emotional leader and most dominant player, was carrying not just the physical burden of playing through various ailments, but the psychological weight of a franchise and fan base desperate for championship success. But this confrontation wasn't primarily about basketball performance or typical professional sports pressures. The roots of Embiid's explosive reaction traced to something far more personal and inappropriate. Hayes had recently penned a critical piece referencing Embiid's late brother Arthur and his young son, crossing fundamental lines from legitimate professional sports criticism into deeply personal territory, touching family tragedy and parental responsibility. This wasn't analysis of basketball skills or strategy. This was using family tragedy and parental relationships as ammunition in professional sports commentary. To understand this transgression's magnitude, it's crucial to understand the personal history Hayes weaponized. Joel Embiid's brother Arthur had died in a car accident in Cameroon several years earlier, a devastating loss that profoundly affected Embiid and continued influencing every aspect of his life. Arthur's death wasn't just family tragedy Embiid had processed, it was formative experience shaping his perspective on life, family, and mortality. When Embiid chose to name his son Arthur, honoring his late brother, it represented a beautiful and deeply personal way of keeping his brother's memory alive while creating connection between his past and future. The naming choice was about love, remembrance, family legacy, and ensuring his brother's memory would continue through the next generation. Hayes' decision to invoke these deeply personal family connections in his criticism represented exactly the boundary crossing that athletes and ethical journalists had been criticized advertising and sports media for years. This wasn't legitimate accountability journalism. This was exploiting personal tragedy for more pointed and attention-grabbing criticism. When Joel Embiid entered the locker room after the Memphis loss, he was already seething with combination of emotions that had been building throughout the day. On-court frustration from another disappointing performance, physical discomfort from ongoing injuries, and rage about Hayes' inappropriate commentary created a perfect storm about to explode spectacularly. Spotting Philadelphia Inquirer columnist Marcus Hayes in the locker room, Embiid exploded with intensity that shocked everyone present. This wasn't gradual escalation. This was immediate, intense, and deeply personal from the first moment of contact. Embiid verbally berated Hayes with intensity that made everyone uncomfortable, invoking his family's tragedies and expressing outrage at what he viewed as completely inappropriate use of personal pain. Teammates and security intervened as Hayes was escorted out, shaken but unharmed. The immediate aftermath was chaotic, with players, coaches, and security working to separate Embiid from Hayes and defuse a situation that could have escalated further. Hayes, while obviously shaken, was not seriously injured, but the psychological and professional impact was enormous. While Embiid's physical confrontation represents the extreme end of player-journalist conflicts. Some feuds play out through calculated verbal warfare across different media platforms. Gilbert Arenas versus Skip Bayless. The feud between Gilbert Arenas and Skip Bayless emerged from years of frustration that had been simmering beneath the surface of sports media discourse. Arenas, the former NBA guard who had transformed himself from a controversial player into an equally controversial podcaster, grew tired of watching Bayless's relentless criticism of LeBron James on Fox Sports shows. This wasn't casual disagreement. This was systematic warfare waged across different platforms. Gilbert Arenas brought unique credibility that Bayless simply couldn't match. During his playing career, Arenas had been one of the NBA's most electrifying guards, capable of taking over games with his scoring ability and clutch genes. He understood the mental pressures of performing under playoff spotlight, having carried the Washington Wizards to multiple postseason appearances while dealing with career-threatening injuries. On his podcast, Gil's Arena, Arenas began methodically dismantling what he called Bayless's crazy narratives about NBA stars, particularly LeBron James. But this wasn't just casual criticism. Arenas was bringing receipts. He would pull up specific game footage, cite advanced statistics that Bayless ignored, and provide historical context that exposed the shallow nature of many hot takes designed more for entertainment than enlightenment. When Bayless fired back on his Fox Sports show, defending his analytical approach and questioning Arenas' credentials as a media critic, this response only fueled Arenas' fire. Bayless attempted to dismiss Arenas' criticism by pointing to his own longevity in sports media and his platform's reach, essentially arguing that popularity validated his approach regardless of accuracy. This led to what he described as hostile threats of verbal destruction toward the veteran analyst. The exchanges became must-see content for basketball fans, with audiences eagerly anticipating the next salvo in this war of words. Arenas would dedicate entire podcast episodes to dissecting Bayless's latest take, often inviting other former players to join in the critique. The irony reached its peak when the two eventually teamed up on a new show, despite all the animosity and public warfare. This unexpected partnership proved that in sports media, even the most bitter feuds can transform into profitable partnership when ratings and revenue opportunities present themselves, demonstrating the business-driven nature of modern sports entertainment. While Arenas and Bayless conducted their feud across traditional media platforms, the most embarrassing player-journalist incident of recent years involved a star's secret digital life being exposed to the entire world. Kevin Durant's burner account fiasco. September 2017 represented a perfect storm of psychological pressure for Kevin Durant. Durant was facing intense backlash for leaving Oklahoma City to join Golden State, with critics arguing his decision represented the ultimate competitive betrayal. The criticism was relentless and personal, extending beyond typical sports analysis into character assassination and questioning of his competitive integrity. The psychological weight of this criticism was compounded by the fact that Durant had always been perceived as someone who cared deeply about public perception and his place in basketball history. Unlike some athletes who seemed genuinely indifferent to outside criticism, Durant had always appeared affected by negative commentary about his performance and decisions. Most athletes facing such criticism would either ignore it completely or address it through official channels. Durant chose differently, maintaining multiple anonymous burner Twitter accounts that allowed him to engage critics without accountability. These accounts had generic usernames and profile pictures, giving no indication of their connection to one of the NBA's biggest stars. Using these accounts, Durant Durant would argue in third person about his former coach and teammate, defending his basketball decisions while pretending to be random NBA fans. The psychological implications were fascinating. Here was one of the world's most talented basketball players, yet he felt compelled to create fake identities defending himself against internet criticism. The carefully maintained deception came crashing down spectacularly when Durant accidentally posted from his main account, exposing the entire ruse in a single catastrophic moment. The tweet was meant for one of his anonymous accounts, but appeared under his verified handle, complete with millions of followers and blue checkmark verification. Screenshots spread like wildfire, with users immediately piecing together evidence and realizing what happened. Within hours, Hashburnergate was trending, and Durant faced a social media storm that was both humiliating and revealing. The incident revealed Durant's sensitivity to criticism in ways no psychological analysis could accomplish.
I wanted a place where I could talk to my friends without anybody just butting in my conversations or mixing my words or taking everything out of context, because I enjoyed that place.
Durant became meme material, with users scrutinizing every future tweet. The term burner account became permanently associated with Durant's name, creating a legacy of digital embarrassment. The scandal sparked conversations about athletes' social media lives and the thin line between privacy and pettiness, raising questions about mental health in professional sports. Thanks for watching. Check out other cards on the screen.